I'll wait here.
Okay. Don't talk to. I got burritos. I got beef.
Make proper introductions. Cry baby. It was weak. Cockroach. The butcher. They are the human equivalent.
Of the onslaught.
Where are you going?
Go to your room.
What do they want?
The onslaught.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Onslaught is one of those movies that immediately grabs your attention because it takes a very simple idea and turns it into something much more dangerous. At the center of the story is Celeste, played by Adria Arjona, a mother who is living a quiet life with her young daughter. But Celeste is not an ordinary mother. Behind the calm life she is trying to build is a past that has prepared her for exactly the kind of nightmare that is about to arrive at her doorstep. And when a group of genetically engineered super soldiers escapes from a secret military facility somewhere in the desert, Celeste is forced to stop running from the person she used to be. The movie comes from director Adam Wingard, the filmmaker known for mixing action, horror, strange characters, and sudden bursts of violence. That combination is important because Onslaught does not look like a straightforward military action movie. It feels much more like a survival thriller where the danger can appear at any moment. The basic setup is surprisingly personal. A mother wants to protect her daughter, but the people coming after them are not normal enemies. They have been created to be stronger, faster, and more dangerous than ordinary human beings. That makes Celeste's decision to fight back even more impressive because she is not simply trying to survive for herself. Everything she does is connected to keeping her daughter alive. Adria Arjona takes the central role as Celeste, and the character gives her a very different kind of challenge. Celeste has the physical skills of an army sniper, but the movie also needs her to feel like a mother who has spent time trying to leave violence behind. That contrast is what makes the character interesting. She is capable of handling herself, but she is not looking for trouble. Trouble simply finds her. Once the threat reaches her home and the people she cares about are placed in danger, she has no choice but to use the skills she tried to bury. The cast around Arjona is also one of the reasons Onslaught has attracted attention. Dan Stevens appears as Hans Kammler, a scientist connected to the secret experiments behind the genetically engineered soldiers. Stevens has already worked with Adam Wingard before, which makes his presence here especially interesting. Rebecca Hall is also part of the cast as Hannah Kammler, while Michael Biehn plays Baylor. Drew Starkey appears as Cyrus, and Reginald VelJohnson plays Josiah. Eric Wareheim is also part of the ensemble as Kovacs. Then there is Alex Pereira, who brings something completely different to the movie. Known primarily for his career as a professional fighter, Pereira plays a genetically enhanced soldier known as the Butcher. His presence immediately gives the character a physical threat that does not need much explanation. When someone with Pereira's real-world fighting ability is placed inside a movie about engineered super soldiers, you already know that some of the confrontations are going to be brutal. The villains are not simply random monsters appearing out of nowhere. They are connected to a secret military experiment, and that detail gives the story a bigger mystery underneath the action. The movie introduces the idea of genetically engineered soldiers who have escaped containment, and suddenly the question is no longer just whether Celeste can protect her daughter. The bigger question becomes what these soldiers were created for in the first place, who controlled them, and why their escape is such a serious problem. That is where the character of Hans Kammler becomes important. A scientist involved with the experiments, Hans represents the side of the story that understands exactly what has been created. Celeste understands survival from experience, while Hans understands the science behind the threat. Their worlds are completely different, but eventually those worlds are forced together. The trailer gives viewers a strong idea of the movie's tone without revealing everything. It starts with the impression that Celeste is living a relatively ordinary life, but that sense of safety quickly disappears. The danger comes from a secret military facility, and once the genetically engineered soldiers escape into the desert, the situation begins to spiral out of control. Instead of presenting the enemies as slow-moving creatures, the footage emphasizes speed, strength, violence, and close-quarters combat. One of the most interesting things about the trailer is how it presents Celeste. She is not introduced as a superhero wearing some futuristic armor. She looks like an ordinary woman who has been pushed into an extraordinary situation. That makes the action feel more immediate. When she fights, it is not because she wants to prove something. She fights because there is someone standing behind her who cannot protect herself, and that person is her daughter, the emotional center of Onslaught is therefore much simpler than the science fiction concept surrounding it. A mother is trying to keep her child alive. The genetically engineered soldiers may be stronger than almost everyone they encounter, but they have one problem. They have chosen the wrong family to threaten. Celeste may have spent years trying to live quietly, but the skills she developed in her former life have not disappeared. This is also where the title Onslaught begins to make sense. The movie seems designed around escalation. One threat leads to another, and every attempt to regain control creates a bigger problem. What starts with an escape from a secret facility eventually becomes a fight for survival involving soldiers, mercenaries, scientists, and ordinary people caught in the middle. The story also has a connection to Adam Wingard's earlier style of filmmaking. Fans familiar with movies like The Guest may notice similarities in the way the film combines a mysterious threat with a grounded setting. There has even been speculation about whether Onslaught could secretly connect to that earlier movie, especially because Dan Stevens and Wingard have worked together before. But rather than depending on that theory, Onslaught appears to stand on its own as its own violent action horror story. What makes the premise particularly exciting is that the movie does not need a huge army of heroes. It has one central character, a small group of dangerous enemies, and a situation that becomes increasingly impossible to control. That can make action feel more intense because the audience understands that Celeste does not have unlimited resources. Every fight matters. Every mistake could put her daughter in danger, and as the threat gets closer, Celeste is forced to make a choice. She can continue pretending that her old life is gone, or she can accept that the skills she once needed are exactly what her daughter needs now. That decision is what sets the real story in motion. Once Celeste realizes that the danger is not going away, the movie shifts from a story about escaping the past into a story about confronting it. She knows what these people are capable of, and more importantly, she knows that ordinary methods are not going to be enough. The soldiers coming after her have been genetically engineered, which means that every normal advantage she might have had as a trained fighter becomes much harder to rely on. But Celeste has something they do not have: experience, patience, and a reason to keep fighting. Her daughter becomes the one thing that keeps her focused when everything around her begins falling apart. Celeste is not trying to defeat an entire military operation because she wants revenge. She simply wants to make sure that her daughter survives the night. That motivation gives the action a much stronger emotional foundation. The movie also appears to understand that a dangerous villain does not always need a complicated explanation. The genetically engineered soldiers are frightening because of what they can physically do. They are faster, stronger, and capable of surviving situations that would stop an ordinary person. The Butcher, played by Alex Pereira, represents that threat in a particularly direct way. His physical presence alone makes every confrontation feel like a serious problem for Celeste, but the danger is not limited to one soldier. The escaped group includes multiple engineered fighters, each bringing a different kind of threat. This gives the movie room to create different types of confrontations instead of repeating the same fight again and again. Sometimes Celeste may need to use her weapons and military training. Other times, she may have to rely on the environment around her. And when things get close and personal, survival may come down to nothing more than instinct. That mixture could be one of the movie's biggest strengths. Instead of turning Celeste into an unstoppable action hero from the first minute, the story allows her situation to become increasingly difficult. She can fight, but she can also be injured. She can plan, but her enemies can surprise her. She knows how to use a weapon, but she cannot simply shoot her way through every problem. And because her daughter is involved, Celeste cannot take every risk she normally might. The setting also plays an important role. Much of the story is connected to a desert environment and a trailer community, which gives the movie a grounded atmosphere. There is something unsettling about placing a group of genetically engineered killers in an ordinary community where people are simply trying to live their lives. The contrast makes the violence feel more unpredictable. Characters like Jusai and Kovacs help expand that community. They are not part of Celeste's military past, but they become connected to the chaos unfolding around her. Their presence gives the story a more human side because the consequences of the military experiment are no longer contained inside a secret facility. The danger has escaped, and innocent people are now standing directly in its path. Meanwhile, the people responsible for the experiments have their own problems. Once something created inside a secret facility escapes into the real world, controlling it becomes much harder. Mercenaries are brought into the situation, and Baylor, played by Michael Biehn, is connected to that side of the conflict. This adds another layer because Celeste is no longer dealing with just one group. There are the engineered soldiers. There are the people trying to control them. And then there is Celeste, who is only interested in protecting her daughter. That triangle gives the story plenty of room to build tension. The trailer also suggests that Onslaught is not afraid of blood and violence. The movie has been positioned as an R-rated action horror thriller, and the footage makes it clear that this is not designed to be a clean, family-friendly action adventure. The fights are rough, the threat is physical, and the movie appears comfortable pushing its characters into extreme situations. That is where Adam Wingard's direction could make a major difference. His work often mixes genre entertainment with unusual visual ideas, and Onslaught seems to be built around that same philosophy. The movie has the structure of a simple action story, but it adds science fiction, horror, dark humor, and a strange collection of characters. The screenplay comes from Simon Barrett, another filmmaker closely associated with Wingard. Their previous collaborations include The Guest and You're Next, so there is a familiar creative partnership behind Onslaught. That matters because the movie is not simply being presented as another generic super soldier film. The goal appears to be something faster, stranger, and more chaotic, and that is probably what makes the movie stand out. Hollywood has produced plenty of stories about secret military experiments and enhanced soldiers, but Onslaught puts that concept inside a much smaller and more personal story. The main conflict is not about saving the entire planet. It is about one mother trying to keep her child safe while a dangerous experiment comes looking for them. The release is scheduled for September 4, 2026, with A24 for handling the movie's theatrical distribution. The film is also expected to receive an IMAX theatrical release, giving its action sequences a chance to play on a much larger screen. With a runtime of roughly an hour and a half, Onslaught is also built to move quickly rather than spend hours explaining every detail of its world. And that could actually work in its favor. Sometimes an action horror movie becomes less exciting when it spends too much time explaining the science behind its monsters. Onslaught appears to be taking a different approach. It gives the audience enough information to understand the threat, then lets the characters deal with the consequences. The trailer has already made one thing very clear. Celeste is going to have to fight, but the bigger question is how far she will go once the people she loves are threatened. Because the most dangerous version of a trained soldier is not necessarily the one who wants revenge. It may be the one who has something to lose. Celeste has spent years trying to build a different life, but the arrival of these genetically engineered soldiers destroys that distance between her past and her present. She cannot simply walk away. She cannot hide forever, and she certainly cannot expect the people around her to survive if she refuses to act. So the real battle in Onslaught is not just between a mother and a group of super soldiers. It is between the life Celeste wanted and the life she is being forced to return to. And when those two worlds finally collide, there may be no going back. There may be no going back. By the time Celeste understands just how serious the situation has become, there is no longer any room for pretending that this is somebody else's problem. The people behind the experiment may have believed they could control what they created, but the moment those soldiers escape, the entire balance changes. These are not ordinary men who can simply be tracked down and arrested. They were designed to survive, to fight, and to keep moving forward no matter how much damage stands in their way. For Celeste, that creates a problem she cannot solve by simply running. She knows that if she leaves the area, the threat could follow her. And if she stays, she is putting her daughter directly in the middle of the danger. That is the kind of impossible choice the movie keeps pushing her toward. Every option carries a price, and the longer she waits, the fewer choices she has left. What makes Celeste especially interesting is that her military background is not presented as something glamorous. She is an army sniper, but she is also a mother who has clearly spent a long time trying to live beyond that part of her life. She does not wake up every morning looking for another fight. In fact, everything about her current life suggests that she would rather stay away from violence. But the past has a strange way of returning when you least expect it. And once Celeste realizes that the people coming after her are connected to a secret military operation, something changes in the way she looks at the situation. She stops reacting and starts thinking. Instead of waiting for the next attack, she begins preparing for it. That is where her experience becomes valuable. She understands that strength alone does not win a battle. Knowing where your enemy is, knowing what they want, and knowing when to strike can be just as important. The soldiers, meanwhile, do not appear to be interested in negotiating. Their presence turns the surrounding area into a battlefield. What should be normal locations suddenly become places where danger could be hiding. A road, a house, a vehicle, or even a seemingly empty stretch of desert can become the setting for the next confrontation, and that uncertainty gives the movie its horror element. You never completely know where the next attack is coming from. One moment, Celeste may believe she has created enough distance between herself and the threat. The next moment, everything can change. That unpredictability is especially important because the enemies are physically superior. Celeste cannot afford to make careless decisions. The three engineered soldiers also give the movie a very different kind of enemy lineup. Crybaby, Cockroach, and the Butcher are not simply three interchangeable villains. Their names alone suggest that the filmmakers are not trying to make these characters feel like standard military antagonists. There is something strange and almost disturbing about them, and that fits perfectly with the movie's mixture of science fiction and horror. The Butcher is perhaps the most intimidating of the three because Alex Pereira brings a natural physical presence to the role. Pereira is already known for being a professional fighter, so seeing him placed into a movie like this makes the character feel dangerous before he even does anything. The audience knows what kind of physical power he possesses, and the movie can use that expectation to make his encounters with Celeste even more threatening. But Celeste does not have to be stronger than these soldiers. She only needs to be smarter. That distinction could become one of the most important parts of the story. If Celeste tried to fight these enhanced soldiers directly every time, she would eventually lose. Instead, her survival depends on using the environment, her training, and the mistakes her enemies make. And that brings another character into focus, Hans Kammler, played by Dan Stevens. Hans is connected to the scientific side of the experiment. His presence gives the movie a character who can help explain what is happening, but he also appears to be connected to the larger mystery surrounding the soldiers. There is clearly more going on than a simple accident at a military facility. The deeper Celeste gets into the situation, the more she has to question who can actually be trusted. That is always dangerous in a story like this because the person offering help might know much more than they are admitting. Somebody who appears to be a victim could actually be connected to the experiment. Someone who claims to have the answers might have helped create the problem in the first place. And Celeste cannot afford to trust the wrong person. This is also where the movie's connection to Adam Wingard's earlier work becomes particularly interesting. Wingard and Simon Barrett have worked together on several genre films, and Onslaught carries some of the same DNA. There is a combination of violence, mystery, dark humor, and genre experimentation that makes the movie feel less like a traditional studio action film. The connection to the guest is especially interesting because Dan Stevens previously played David Collins in that movie, a character with a mysterious military past. Onslaught is described as existing in the same universe, but it does not simply repeat the story of the guest. Instead, it appears to expand some of the ideas surrounding military experimentation and enhance soldiers into something much larger and more brutal. That means longtime fans may notice certain thematic connections, while new viewers can still experience Onslaught as its own story, and that is probably the best way to approach it. At its heart, this is still Celeste's story. Everything else, the secret facility, the experiments, the soldiers, the scientists, and the people trying to contain the situation exists around her central struggle. She is trying to protect her daughter while being forced to confront a part of herself that she thought she had left behind. The more dangerous the situation becomes, the more obvious it is that Celeste cannot protect her daughter by simply hiding. Eventually, she has to become the person she tried so hard not to be. That transformation is what could give Onslaught its strongest emotional moments. We are not watching a trained killer discover that she can fight. We are watching someone who already knows how to fight decide whether she is willing to become that person again. There is a difference. And that difference matters because Celeste has a daughter watching her. Every decision she makes is going to shape how her child sees the world. Celeste wants to show her that they can have a normal life, but the reality surrounding them is anything but normal. The threat has already crossed the line. Now Celeste has to decide where she is going to draw hers. The problem with a secret experiment is that secrets rarely stay buried forever. Someone always knows something, someone always leaves evidence behind, and sooner or later the people responsible have to deal with the consequences. For Celeste, that consequence has arrived in the worst possible way. The experiment is no longer hidden inside a facility. The people created by it are moving freely, and every hour they remain outside increases the chances of more people getting hurt. Celeste understands that better than anyone. she also understands something else. The soldiers may be dangerous, but they are not the only threat. Whoever created them is still somewhere behind the scenes, watching everything unfold and trying to regain control. That means stopping one attacker will not necessarily solve the problem. There is a much bigger operation behind what is happening, and Celeste is slowly being pulled toward its center. For years, she has tried to separate herself from that world. Her military career is something she would rather leave in the past, but the skills she learned during those years have become impossible to ignore. Her ability to read a situation, notice small details, and stay calm under pressure gives her an advantage that the people chasing her may not expect. They see a mother. Celeste knows she is more than that. But being a trained soldier does not make her fearless. If anything, her experience tells her exactly how dangerous the situation is. She knows what happens when someone underestimates an armed opponent. She knows how quickly a plan can collapse. And she knows that one mistake could be enough to put her daughter directly in the hands of people who should never be trusted. That fear makes her more careful, not weaker. Instead of rushing toward the first opportunity to fight back, Celeste begins looking for information. She needs to understand what the soldiers want and why they are there. If she can figure that out, she may be able to predict their next move, but the answers are not easy to find. The military operation surrounding the experiment appears to have been designed to keep outsiders away. People involved in the project have reasons to stay silent, and anyone who starts asking the wrong questions could quickly become a target. That creates a strange situation where information becomes almost as valuable as weapons. Hans Kammler is one of the people who may hold some of those answers. His scientific background puts him much closer to the origin of the experiment than Celeste could ever be, but that does not automatically make him trustworthy. The more Celeste learns about the project, the harder it becomes to separate the people who created these soldiers from the people who are simply trying to survive them. Hans may know how the experiment works. He may know why the soldiers were created, and he may know exactly what they are capable of, but knowledge comes with a price. If the wrong person learns that Hans has information about the project, he could become just as valuable a target as Celeste. Suddenly, the people involved in the experiment have another reason to move quickly. They cannot allow information about their work to spread beyond their control. That creates pressure from every direction. Celeste is trying to protect her daughter. Hans is caught between scientific knowledge and the consequences of the project. The soldiers are loose, and the people responsible for them are desperately trying to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, the ordinary people around them have no idea how dangerous their situation really is. That contrast is one of the things that makes the setting work. On one side, there is a secret military experiment involving genetically engineered human beings. On the other, there are regular people living their everyday lives, completely unaware that something violent is moving closer. The movie can take advantage of that difference to create tension without constantly relying on explosions. Sometimes the most uncomfortable moment is simply watching a character walk into a place without realizing what is waiting for them. Celeste knows better. She has already seen what these soldiers can do. So when other people underestimate them, she immediately recognizes the danger. This also changes her relationship with the people around her. She cannot tell everyone everything because revealing the truth could put them at greater risk. At the same time, keeping people in the dark means they may make decisions that accidentally expose themselves. It becomes a question of trust. Who deserves to know? Who can actually help? And who might already be working for the people behind the experiment? These questions give the story room to slow down between the action sequences without losing momentum. Every conversation can contain information that becomes important later. Every new character can potentially change the direction of the story. And then there is the possibility that Celeste's own past is more connected to the experiment than she realizes. That is where the story can begin to become much more personal. If Celeste was once part of the military world, surrounding projects like this, then her knowledge may not be accidental. She may understand certain things because of what she experienced before leaving that life behind. The question is whether she remembers everything or whether there are parts of her past that she has deliberately tried to forget. For someone who has spent years trying to build a peaceful life, discovering that her old world is connected to the nightmare threatening her daughter would be devastating. But it would also explain why Celeste is so capable. She is not learning how to survive now. She is remembering how. And there is a major difference between those two things. The people chasing her may believe they are hunting an ordinary woman. That assumption could become their biggest mistake. They may know that Celeste has military training, but they do not necessarily understand what she is capable of when she has nowhere left to run. As the pressure increases, Celeste's priorities become clearer. She does not need to defeat everyone. She needs to create enough time and distance to get her daughter somewhere safe. That sounds simple. It is anything but. Every roadout may be watched. Every person who offers assistance could have an agenda. And the soldiers themselves do not need much time to turn a safe location into a deadly one. The longer Celeste stays in one place, the greater the risk. So she begins preparing to move, but before she can disappear, something happens that makes it clear the enemy is already much closer than she thought. The hunt is no longer taking place somewhere in the distance. It has reached her doorstep. And this time, Celeste is ready for it. Celeste is ready for it. The problem with a secret experiment is that secrets rarely stay buried forever. Someone always knows something, someone always leaves evidence behind, and sooner or later the people responsible have to deal with the consequences. For Celeste, that consequence has arrived in the worst possible way. The experiment is no longer hidden inside a facility. The people created by it are moving freely, and every hour they remain outside increases the chances of more people getting hurt. Celeste understands that better than anyone. She also understands something else. The soldiers may be dangerous, but they are not the only threat. Whoever created them is still somewhere behind the scenes, watching everything unfold and trying to regain control. That means stopping one attacker will not necessarily solve the problem. There is a much bigger operation behind what is happening, and Celeste is slowly being pulled toward its center. For years, she has tried to separate herself from that world. Her military career is something she would rather leave in the past, but the skills she learned during those years have become impossible to ignore. Her ability to read a situation, notice small details, and stay calm under pressure gives her an advantage that the people chasing her may not expect. They see a mother. Celeste knows she is more than that. But being a trained soldier does not make her fearless. If anything, her experience tells her exactly how dangerous the situation is. She knows what happens when someone underestimates an armed opponent. She knows how quickly a plan can collapse. And she knows that one mistake could be enough to put her daughter directly in the hands of people who should never be trusted. That fear makes her more careful, not weaker. Instead of rushing toward the first opportunity to fight back, Celeste begins looking for information. She needs to understand what the soldiers want and why they are there. If she can figure that out, she may be able to predict their next move, but the answers are not easy to find. The military operation surrounding the experiment appears to have been designed to keep outsiders away. People involved in the project have reasons to stay silent, and anyone who starts asking the wrong questions could quickly become a target. That creates a strange situation where information becomes almost as valuable as weapons. Hans Kammler is one of the people who may hold some of those answers. His scientific background puts him much closer to the origin of the experiment than Celeste could ever be, but that does not automatically make him trustworthy. The more Celeste learns about the project, the harder it becomes to separate the people who created these soldiers from the people who are simply trying to survive them. Hans may know how the experiment works. He may know why the soldiers were created, and he may know exactly what they are capable of, but knowledge comes with a price. If the wrong person learns that Hans has information about the project, he could become just as valuable a target as Celeste. Suddenly, the people involved in the experiment have another reason to move quickly. They cannot allow information about their work to spread beyond their control. That creates pressure from every direction. Celeste is trying to protect her daughter. Hans is caught between scientific knowledge and the consequences of the project. The soldiers are loose, and the people responsible for them are desperately trying to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, the ordinary people around them have no idea how dangerous their situation really is. That contrast is one of the things that makes the setting work. On one side, there is a secret military experiment involving genetically engineered human beings. On the other, there are regular people living their everyday lives, completely unaware that something violent is moving closer. The movie can take advantage of that difference to create tension without constantly relying on explosions. Sometimes the most uncomfortable moment is simply watching a character walk into a place without realizing what is waiting for them. Celeste knows better. She has already seen what these soldiers can do. So when other people underestimate them, she immediately recognizes the danger. This also changes her relationship with the people around her. She cannot tell everyone everything because revealing the truth could put them at greater risk. At the same time, keeping people in the dark means they may make decisions that accidentally expose themselves. It becomes a question of trust. Who deserves to know? Who can actually help? And who might already be working for the people behind the experiment? These questions give the story room to slow down between the action sequences without losing momentum. Every conversation can contain information that becomes important later. Every new character can potentially change the direction of the story. And then there is the possibility that Celeste's own past is more connected to the experiment than she realizes. That is where the story can begin to become much more personal. If Celeste was once part of the military world, surrounding projects like this, then her knowledge may not be accidental. She may understand certain things because of what she experienced before leaving that life behind. The question is whether she remembers everything or whether there are parts of her past that she has deliberately tried to forget. For someone who has spent years trying to build a peaceful life, discovering that her old world is connected to the nightmare threatening her daughter would be devastating. But it would also explain why Celeste is so capable. She is not learning how to survive now. She is remembering how. And there is a major difference between those two things. The people chasing her may believe they are hunting an ordinary woman. That assumption could become their biggest mistake. They may know that Celeste has military training, but they do not necessarily understand what she is capable of when she has nowhere left to run. As the pressure increases, Celeste's priorities become clearer. She does not need to defeat everyone. She needs to create enough time and distance to get her daughter somewhere safe. That sounds simple. It is anything but. Every road out may be watched. Every person who offers assistance could have an agenda. And the soldiers themselves do not need much time to turn a safe location into a deadly one. The longer Celeste stays in one place, the greater the risk. So she begins preparing to move, but before she can disappear, something happens that makes it clear the enemy is already much closer than she thought. The hunt is no longer taking place somewhere in the distance. It has reached her doorstep. And this time, Celeste is ready for it. Celeste is ready for it. Celeste knows that the blocked road is not a coincidence. Someone knew where she was going, which means her enemies have access to information she never expected them to have. That realization changes everything. Running blindly is no longer an option. If every predictable move can be anticipated, then she has to stop behaving like a target. She takes a moment to study the situation. There are too many questions, but one matters more than the rest. How did they know? Her mind immediately goes through the possibilities. Someone could have followed them. Someone could have tracked their vehicle. Or someone close to the operation may have information about her movements. None of those possibilities is comforting. Celeste pulls her daughter away from the obvious route and looks for another way through. The safest choice would be to turn around, but she knows that could be exactly what the people waiting for her expect. So instead, she chooses a direction they may not have considered. The decision is risky, but Celeste has learned something important during the night. Her enemies are depending on her behaving like someone who is afraid. They expect her to run toward safety. What they do not expect is for her to deliberately move toward uncertainty. She leaves the main route and disappears into a less accessible area, using the darkness and surrounding terrain to hide their movement. Her daughter stays close, and Celeste keeps reminding herself that they only need to make it through the next few minutes, not the whole night, just the next few minutes. That mindset helps her stay focused. Elsewhere, the people responsible for the operation realize that their plan has failed. The target has disappeared again. For them, this is more than an inconvenience. Every minute Celeste remains free increases the possibility that information about the experiment will escape. That cannot happen. The project is too valuable. The people behind it have invested too much money, time, and secrecy into creating these enhanced soldiers. They cannot allow a single escaped subject to expose everything. But now they have another problem. Celeste is beginning to understand how the operation works. And once she starts connecting the pieces, controlling her becomes much harder. Hans Kammler finds himself caught in the middle of this growing crisis. His scientific knowledge gives him an understanding of the soldiers that most people do not have, but knowledge does not necessarily give him control. The experiment has produced something that is proving difficult to contain. There is a difference between creating something powerful and actually being able to control it. The soldiers may have been engineered to follow orders, but once they are outside the environment where they were created, things become unpredictable. That unpredictability is exactly what makes them dangerous. One of the soldiers moves through the area searching for Celeste. There is no rush in his movements. He knows that eventually she will have to make another move. He simply needs to find the right moment. Celeste, however, has stopped thinking about the soldiers as unstoppable monsters. She has started looking at them as hunters. And every hunter has patterns. She observes the way they search. She notices where they look first and where they do not. She realizes that their physical advantages do not automatically give them perfect awareness. That gives her an opening. She creates a distraction away from her actual position. The soldier takes the bait. For several seconds, Celeste watches from a hidden position while the enemy moves toward the false signal. She does not attack immediately. She waits. Patience has always been one of her strongest weapons. When the soldier finally moves far enough away, Celeste gets her daughter moving again. But the escape does not go unnoticed. Another member of the operation has been watching. Suddenly, Celeste is caught between two dangers. She can continue moving and risk being discovered, or she can stop and deal with the person who has spotted them. She chooses the second option. The confrontation is fast and brutal. Celeste does not waste energy trying to make the fight look impressive. She attacks with one goal in mind, and it quickly. Her military training takes over. A few precise movements, a sudden change of position, a weapon used at exactly the right moment, and the threat is neutralized. But Celeste knows she cannot stay there. The sound of the struggle may have attracted attention. She takes what she needs and keeps moving. Her daughter asks where they are going. Celeste does not have a complete answer. She simply tells her that they are going somewhere safe, but deep down, she knows that the idea of a completely safe place may no longer exist. The deeper she gets into this situation, the more she understands that the only way to protect her daughter may be to uncover the truth behind the experiment. If she knows what the soldiers are looking for, she may be able to predict them. If she knows who is controlling them, she may be able to stop the operation. And if she discovers why these people were created in the first place, she might finally understand why her own past has become part of this nightmare. That thought stays with her. Why her? Why now? Why did these people come after her family instead of simply disappearing into the desert? There has to be a reason. And Celeste begins to suspect that the answer may be connected to something she experienced years earlier. Before she became a mother, before she tried to leave the military world behind, before she convinced herself that her old life was finished. The possibility is uncomfortable because it suggests that she may not have escaped her past at all. She may have only been waiting for it to find her again. Meanwhile, Hans is beginning to realize that the situation is becoming impossible to contain. The soldiers are not behaving exactly as expected. Celeste is proving far more capable than anyone predicted, and the operation is attracting attention. If the people above him decide that the experiment has become a liability, they may choose to destroy everything connected to it, including the people who know too much. That could put Hans in even greater danger. For the first time, he has to decide where his loyalty actually belongs. Does he protect the project? Does he protect himself? Or does he finally admit that what was created inside that facility should never have existed? The answer may determine what happens next, because Celeste is no longer simply running from the experiment. She is getting closer to its secrets, and somewhere in the darkness, the people who created the soldiers are beginning to realize that their biggest mistake may not have been letting the experiment escape. It may have been giving Celeste a reason to fight back. Celeste has reached the point where instinct alone is no longer enough. She needs answers, and she needs them quickly. Every move she makes seems to reveal another layer of the operation surrounding these soldiers, and the more she discovers, the less accidental everything begins to look. Someone wanted these creatures to exist. Someone spent years developing them, and someone is still willing to do almost anything to keep the truth hidden. That realization changes the way Celeste looks at the people chasing her. They are no longer simply trying to recover escaped experiments. There is something much more important at stake. Information. Celeste may not know exactly what the project was designed to accomplish, but she now understands that the people behind it are afraid of exposure. That fear can be used against them. Instead of trying to disappear completely, she begins looking for a way to force them into making a mistake. The first step is finding somewhere she can think. She takes her daughter away from the immediate danger and finds temporary shelter. It is not perfect, and Celeste knows it will not remain safe for long. but she needs a few minutes to work out her next move. Her daughter is exhausted. Celeste can see it. The child has spent hours moving from one dangerous situation to another, and despite Celeste's attempts to keep her calm, the fear is becoming harder to hide. That creates another problem. Celeste can handle physical danger. She cannot simply fight her daughter's fear. So for a moment, the action stops. Celeste sits with her daughter and tries to make her understand that everything will be okay. She does not give her every detail. There are some things a child should never have to hear, but Celeste also knows that pretending everything is normal would be a lie. Her daughter asks the question Celeste has been avoiding. Why are these people after them? Celeste pauses. There is no easy answer. She could say that the attackers are dangerous people. She could say that they made a mistake. But deep down, she knows the truth is probably connected to her own history. Before she can explain, they hear movement outside. The quiet moment is over. Celeste immediately becomes alert. She checks the area and realizes that someone has found them again. This time, however, she is prepared. She has already studied the way her enemies operate. She knows they are confident in their physical abilities. They expect people to panic when they appear. So Celeste does the opposite. She waits. The attackers move closer. They believe they have cornered her, but Celeste has chosen the location carefully. There are limited entrances. Limited visibility. And only a few directions from which an attack can come. She turns the environment into a weapon. The first attacker enters. Celeste strikes. The encounter is quick, but it creates enough confusion for her to move her daughter through another exit. She does not stay to finish the fight. She knows better. The objective is not victory. It is distance. Outside, the situation becomes even more chaotic. The attackers realize that Celeste has escaped again, and frustration begins spreading through the operation. Their original confidence is disappearing. She should have been an easy target. Instead, she keeps slipping away. That failure eventually reaches the people in charge. They begin asking why a former army sniper has managed to stay ahead of a team equipped with genetically engineered soldiers. The answer is uncomfortable. They underestimated her, but another possibility is even more troubling. Maybe they underestimated what Celeste already knows. If she has recognized the connection between the soldiers and the experiment, then she may eventually find the facility or the people responsible. That cannot be allowed. A new order is issued. Celeste is no longer to be captured at any cost. She is to be stopped before she reaches the truth. That change in orders raises the stakes immediately. Until this point, Celeste could believe that the attackers wanted something from her. Now she understands that they may simply want her gone. There is no negotiation anymore. No possibility of surrender. The only thing standing between Celeste and death is her ability to stay ahead of them. But there is another complication. The soldiers are starting to behave differently. They were created for a purpose, but something about their behavior suggests that they are not completely predictable. They may have been engineered to obey commands, but they still react to their surroundings, and that makes them more than weapons. It makes them unpredictable. The people who created them may have expected obedience. What they are getting is something much harder to control. This becomes particularly obvious with the butcher. His approach is different from the others. He does not simply rush toward the target. He seems to enjoy the hunt. For him, Celeste is not just an assignment. She is a challenge, and that makes him even more dangerous. Celeste eventually realizes that one of the soldiers is following a different pattern. Instead of trying to intercept her directly, he appears to be predicting where she will go next. That means someone is learning from her movements. The hunter is adapting. Celeste knows she has to adapt faster. She changes direction again, abandoning the route she had planned. Her daughter stays close as they move through the surrounding area, but this time, Celeste is not simply trying to escape. She is looking for something. A communication point. A vehicle, any piece of equipment that might give her access to information about the operation. If she can find a way into their system, she may finally learn who is coordinating the hunt. And then she sees an opportunity. A vehicle connected to the operation has been left unattended. Celeste approaches carefully. She checks it for traps. Nothing. She opens the door. Inside, she finds equipment that confirms one of her worst suspicions. They have been tracking her, not just following her physically, tracking her movements from a distance. That explains how they knew where she was going. It also gives Celeste something she has desperately needed since the beginning: Weakness. If they can track her, then perhaps she can use the same system to track them. For the first time, the balance begins to shift. Celeste is no longer completely blind. She now has a way to see where the operation is moving. And somewhere on that network is a location that may lead directly back to the people who created the soldiers. Celeste looks at the information in front of her. Then she makes a decision that changes everything. She is not going to run anymore. She is going to find the source. Because if the people behind this operation want to keep hunting her, then eventually they are going to have to face the person they should have been afraid of from the beginning. The information inside the vehicle gives Celeste something she has not had since this nightmare began: a direction. It is not a complete picture, but it is enough to tell her that the operation has a central point somewhere nearby. More importantly, the people hunting her are still communicating with each other, which means their movements can be tracked. For the first time, Celeste has a chance to turn their own system against them. She studies the equipment carefully while keeping one eye on her daughter. She knows she cannot stay there for long. If the vehicle is being monitored, someone will eventually notice that it has been accessed, but she needs just enough information to identify the location. A few seconds later, she finds what she is looking for: a series of coordinates. Celeste does not recognize the location immediately, but something about it feels familiar. It is connected to the desert, away from the populated areas, and far enough from normal traffic that a secret operation could remain hidden there for years. She saves the information and leaves. Now she has a destination. The problem is that the destination may be exactly where the people behind the experiment want her to go. Celeste understands the risk. If they know she has accessed their system, they could deliberately feed her false information. They could be creating a trap designed specifically for someone like her, but there is no way to know without investigating. And Celeste has reached the point where ignorance is more dangerous than taking a risk. She gets her daughter moving. Again, the journey is quieter than the previous escape, but the tension never disappears. Celeste knows that the enemy is still searching, and every minute she spends traveling toward the facility increases the possibility that someone will notice. Her daughter eventually asks where they are going. This time, Celeste gives her a partial answer: they are going to find someone who might be able to help them. It is not the whole truth, but it is the truth she can safely give. Meanwhile, the operation has started to fall apart from the inside. The people responsible for the soldiers are becoming increasingly frustrated. They expected the escaped subjects to be contained quickly. Instead, one of the most important targets has disappeared, and the person they believed would be easiest to eliminate is now moving directly toward them. The situation becomes even worse when they discover that their tracking system has been accessed. Someone has entered their network. At first, they assume it must be an outside intrusion. Then they realize who it is. Celeste. That discovery sends a wave of concern through the operation. If she has access to their tracking data, she may already know where they are. And if she knows where they are, then the entire purpose of the operation is at risk. The order goes out immediately: move the sensitive equipment, secure the remaining personnel, and most importantly, make sure Celeste never reaches the facility. But moving everything takes time, and time is exactly what Celeste now has on her side. As she gets closer to the coordinates, the environment begins changing. The populated areas disappear behind her. The road becomes emptier. There are fewer signs of ordinary life. That is exactly what she expected. A place like this would be perfect for something that was never supposed to be discovered. Eventually, she sees signs of human activity. Not enough to attract attention, just enough to confirm that the location is being used. Celeste stops before going any farther. She does not drive straight toward the facility. Instead, she watches. There are security cameras positioned around the perimeter. Vehicles come and go at irregular intervals. The entire location looks almost abandoned from a distance, but Celeste knows that appearance is part of the security. She has seen facilities like this before. The best hiding place is often the one nobody thinks is worth searching. She leaves the vehicle behind and begins moving on foot. Her daughter remains hidden nearby, protected in a location Celeste believes the security teams will overlook. This is one of the hardest decisions she has made all night. She wants to keep her daughter with her, but bringing her into the facility would be even more dangerous. So Celeste makes a promise: she will be back. Then she disappears into the darkness. Inside the facility, something very different is happening. Hans Kammler is looking at the data from the escaped soldiers, and what he sees is not reassuring. Their condition is changing. The experiment may have produced effects that were never fully anticipated. The soldiers were designed to be powerful. But power without stability is a serious problem. Hans begins questioning whether the project was ever truly under control. He may have helped create something that cannot simply be switched off. And now the consequences are moving toward the people who created them. Senior member of the operation demands answers. Hans tries to explain that the soldiers are not behaving exactly as expected. The response is simple. They do not care. The project must be protected. The people outside must never know what happened inside. Hans realizes that the organization is willing to sacrifice anyone necessary to keep the experiment secret, including him. That realization forces him to reconsider his position. For a long time, he may have convinced himself that the work had a purpose. Maybe he believed the technology could change warfare. Maybe he believed the risks were acceptable. But now he is watching the consequences unfold in front of him, and he knows there is no easy way to undo what has already been done. Then a security alarm appears on one of the monitors. Someone has entered the perimeter. The guards assume it is one of the escaped soldiers, but Hans immediately understands something else. Celeste has arrived. The facility goes into lockdown. Doors close. Security teams move into position, and the people inside finally realize that the woman they have been hunting is no longer trying to escape them. She has come directly to them. Celeste moves through the first section of the facility carefully, avoiding cameras and patrols. She finds evidence of what happened here: equipment, restraints, medical stations, and records connected to the experiments. Every room answers one question while creating another. This place was not built simply to study the soldiers. It was built to create them, and the scale of the operation is much larger than Celeste imagined. She discovers files containing information about the subjects. Names, numbers, medical records, experiment results. Then she sees something that stops her completely. Her own name. Celeste stares at the file. For a moment, she cannot move. She always believed her military past was separate from this nightmare, but now the evidence is sitting directly in front of her. Whatever happened here, she was connected to it. And suddenly the question is no longer why these people came after her. The real question is much more disturbing. What did they do to Celeste before she ever became a mother? And how much of her own past has she forgotten? Celeste keeps staring at the file, almost as if looking away might make the name disappear. For years, she has carried memories from her military career without ever questioning every detail. There were missions she never talked about, people she never mentioned, and periods of her life that she simply refused to revisit. She always assumed those memories belonged to a difficult chapter that was finally over. Now she is standing inside a facility that was never supposed to exist, looking at evidence suggesting that her past may have been connected to something much darker. She opens the file. At first, the information does not make sense. There are medical records, mission references, psychological evaluations, and notes that use technical language she does not immediately understand. Some of the dates are familiar. Others seem impossible. Then she notices a reference to a military operation she remembers. The location is correct, the date is correct, but the details are different from what she remembers. Celeste slowly realizes that the official version of that mission may not have been the whole story. Someone had removed information. Someone had changed records, and someone had made sure she would never know what actually happened. That discovery hits harder than any physical attack could have, because if her memories were manipulated or incomplete, then Celeste cannot even be certain that she understands her own past. She continues searching through the files. There are references to soldiers who were evaluated for unusual physical and psychological characteristics. Some were considered potential candidates for advanced military programs, others were rejected. The documents never openly explain the full purpose of the project, but the connections are becoming impossible to ignore. Celeste's name appears again, and this time, there is a photograph attached to the record. It shows her much younger, wearing her military uniform. But there is something strange about the photograph. She does not remember being photographed there. She does not remember the room behind her, and she certainly does not remember the person standing beside her. That person is Hans Kammler. Celeste takes a step back. For a moment, everything becomes silent. Hans is not just a scientist who became involved with the project. He was there before she left the military. That means he may have known her long before she ever knew him. Before she can process what that means, she hears footsteps outside the room. Someone is coming. Celeste quickly copies the most important information and closes the file. She moves into a nearby storage area just before two security personnel enter. They are talking about the lockdown. They know someone has entered the facility. They do not yet know exactly where she is. Celeste waits. The two men move deeper into the room. She remains completely still. Her training tells her to act only when necessary. One of the guards turns toward her hiding place. Celeste moves. The confrontation is sudden and controlled. She takes them down before they can raise the alarm and immediately moves on. But now she has a bigger problem. The facility is waking up. Lights switch on in different sections. Security doors begin closing. The people inside know an intruder is moving through their building. And they are beginning to realize that the intruder is not one of the escaped soldiers. It is Celeste. She continues deeper into the facility because leaving without answers would mean returning to the same uncertainty she started with. She needs to know what happened to her, and more importantly, she needs to know whether her daughter is somehow connected to the project. That thought frightens her more than anything else. Celeste reaches another section, containing older records. The files here are different. They are not about the current soldiers. They concern earlier stages of the research. Some experiments failed. Others produced unstable results, and several subjects did not survive. Celeste reads through the information. Realizing that the project has existed for much longer than she imagined, the soldiers chasing her are not the beginning. They are the result of years of experimentation. Then she finds a reference to a program involving military personnel. The wording is deliberately vague, but one phrase stands out: human enhancement. Celeste remembers being approached years ago by people claiming they were working on advanced military survival programs. She remembers medical tests. She remembers being told that the research was classified, but she does not remember agreeing to anything beyond standard military evaluation. Now she begins to wonder whether that was ever the truth. A sound behind her interrupts the thought. Celeste turns. Hans is standing at the other end of the corridor. For several seconds, neither of them speaks. There is no immediate attack. No weapon is raised, just silence. Hans looks at Celeste as if he has been expecting this moment. Celeste asks the question that has been building inside her. How long has he known her? Hans does not answer immediately. That hesitation tells her enough. He knew. He knew about her military history. He knew about the experiment. And he knew that the escaped soldiers would eventually bring them back together. Celeste wants an explanation. Hans finally admits that her involvement with the program goes back further than she remembers. But he insists that not everything she has been told is true. According to him, the people running the project did not simply study soldiers. They were looking for ways to create human beings capable of surviving extreme physical conditions. The problem was that the research became more ambitious, more invasive, and more dangerous. Celeste asks whether she was one of the subjects. Hans says no, but the answer does not sound convincing. She pushes him. Hans explains that Celeste was not created by the program, but she was evaluated because of certain abilities and physical characteristics that made her valuable to the researchers. Her military record had attracted their attention. Her ability to remain calm under pressure. Her accuracy, her physical endurance, her psychological profile. They wanted to understand why some people could survive situations that destroyed others. Celeste realizes that her career may have been observed far more closely than she ever knew. But Hans still refuses to explain why her name is inside the current project files. Before he can say more, the lights suddenly shut off. The facility falls into darkness. Hans looks genuinely frightened. Celeste immediately knows something is wrong. The emergency system should have activated. It does not. Then they hear a heavy impact somewhere deeper inside the building. Another impact follows. Then another. Something is moving through the facility. Hans looks toward the corridor. He knows exactly what it is. One of the engineered soldiers has entered the building. But this time, the soldier is not hunting Celeste. He is looking for something else. And whatever that target is, Hans clearly believes it could be even more dangerous than Celeste herself. The sound gets closer. Celeste grips her weapon. Hans tells her they need to move. Celeste asks him one final question. Who is the soldier looking for? Hans looks at her. And his answer changes the entire situation. He says the soldier is looking for him, because Hans is the only person left who knows how to stop the experiment. Hans does not wait for Celeste to ask another question. The moment he says that the soldier is looking for him, his entire attitude changes. Until now, he has been trying to remain calm, carefully choosing what information to reveal, but whatever is moving through the facility has taken away that control. He knows they do not have much time. Celeste keeps her weapon raised as another heavy impact shakes the corridor. Dust falls from the ceiling, and somewhere in the darkness, metal bends under an enormous amount of force. Hans tells her they need to reach a secure section of the facility. Celeste does not trust him, not completely, but she also understands that killing him or leaving him behind could mean losing the only person who knows what is really happening. So she follows. They move through the dark corridors while the emergency lights flicker on and off. The facility suddenly feels less like a controlled military installation and more like a maze that has been abandoned to something dangerous. Hans keeps checking behind them. Celeste notices. He is afraid. That tells her more than anything he has said so far. This is not the behavior of a man who believes he has everything under control. Whatever is coming after them scares him. They reach a reinforced door, and Hans enters a security code. The door opens just enough for them to slip through before closing again. On the other side is a control room filled with monitors. Most of the screens are showing static, others display different sections of the facility. Celeste watches the screens carefully. Then she sees movement. One of the soldiers is walking through a corridor. Slowly. Almost casually. There is no hesitation in his movements. He knows exactly where he is going. Celeste asks Hans why the soldier is not simply attacking everyone. Hans explains that these subjects were designed with specific neurological responses. They are capable of following objectives and identifying certain targets. But the system that controls those responses is not as stable as the scientists originally believed. That means the soldiers can interpret their orders in unexpected ways. Celeste looks at the monitor again. The soldier stops. He turns toward the camera. For a second, it almost feels like he is looking directly at them. Hans immediately switches off the monitor. Celeste notices his reaction. She asks what he is hiding. Hans finally admits that the project had a contingency system. If the subjects ever escaped, there was supposed to be a method of shutting them down, but that system failed. Celeste asks why. Hans tells her that the person who designed the original system is dead, and that leaves only one person who understands the modifications made afterward. Hans. Celeste realizes why the soldier is after him. If Hans dies, the remaining knowledge about the project could disappear with him, but that does not explain why the soldier wants him alive or dead. Hans admits that he does not know. And for the first time, Celeste sees genuine uncertainty in his face. Before they can continue, an alarm suddenly sounds. The main security door begins shaking. Something has reached them. Hans immediately starts working on the control panel. Celeste positions herself between the door and the room's secondary entrance. The first impact comes. The reinforced door bends slightly. Another impact. The frame begins to crack. Celeste tells Hans to hurry. He says he needs more time. The third impact is much stronger. The door nearly gives way. Celeste fires through the opening. The shots slow the attacker for only a moment. Then everything goes quiet. Hans stops typing. Celeste waits. Nothing. She knows better than to believe it is over. The silence is broken when the ceiling above them suddenly collapses. The soldier comes through from above. Celeste dives out of the way as debris crashed across the room. Hans is thrown against a console. The soldier lands heavily and immediately moves toward him. Celeste fires again. This time, the soldier turns toward her. For a brief moment, they stare at each other. Celeste recognizes the look. There is no fear. No hesitation, only focus. The soldier charges. Celeste moves. The fight becomes close and chaotic. She uses the narrow room to keep him from gaining full momentum. She ducks under a strike, moves behind a console, and fires whenever she has an opening. But the soldier is too strong. He grabs the edge of the console and throws it aside as if it weighs almost nothing. Celeste barely avoids the impact. She realizes she cannot win by fighting normally. Again, she changes tactics. She uses the facility itself. She triggers an electrical system, causing sparks to erupt across the floor. The soldier hesitates. That hesitation is enough. Celeste attacks. She manages to knock him backward and creates an opening for Hans to escape. They run. Behind them, The soldier recovers, and he follows. The chase moves deeper into the facility. Hans leads Celeste toward a lower level that does not appear on the public facility plans. Celeste immediately notices this section was hidden. Hans tells her that the original experiments were conducted below ground. The lower they go, the colder the environment becomes. The walls change from ordinary concrete to reinforced metal. There are observation windows along the corridor. Behind several of them are empty rooms. Behind others are restraints. Celeste stops at one of the windows. She realizes that these rooms were designed for human subjects, not animals. Humans. The discovery makes the entire project feel more disturbing. This was never just about creating soldiers. People were brought here. People were tested. People were changed. Some survived, others did not. Hans continues walking, but Celeste refuses to move. She asks him how many people died. Hans does not answer. She asks again. This time, he quietly says that he lost count. Celeste's expression changes. Whatever sympathy she may have had for him disappears. He may not have been the person who designed the entire program, but he was part of it. He knew what was happening, and he stayed. Hans tries to explain that he believed the research could eventually save lives. Celeste tells him that does not excuse what happened here. Their argument is interrupted by a sound from one of the rooms. Something is moving behind the glass. Hans freezes. Celeste raises her weapon. They approach slowly. The room appears empty. Then a figure moves in the darkness. Not one of the soldiers they have already seen. This subject is smaller. Weaker. But still alive. Hans looks shocked. He believed every subject in this section was dead. Celeste asks who it is. Hans cannot answer. The figure slowly steps into the light, and Celeste recognizes the face, not because she knows the person, because she has seen the face before. It is in one of the old photographs from her military records, a person connected to the same operation that changed her own life. Celeste realizes that the experiment did not end years ago. It continued. Someone has been kept alive down here all this time. And whatever this person knows could finally explain the missing pieces of Celeste's past. But before she can open the door, the entire lower level goes into lockdown. Red lights begin flashing. A computerized voice announces that containment has failed. Hans looks toward the corridor. The engineered soldier is coming. But now Celeste has another problem. The person inside the room is still alive. And if the facility's security system is about to destroy this entire section, she may only have seconds to choose between escaping with her daughter and saving the one person who could reveal the truth. For the first time tonight, Celeste realizes that protecting her family and uncovering the truth may require two completely different choices, and she may not have enough time to make both. The warning continues to echo through the underground facility, and Celeste knows she cannot stand there trying to understand everything. The containment system has been activated, which means whoever designed this place expected situations exactly like this one. If the system decides that the lower level has become compromised, it may seal the entire section and eliminate anything left inside, including the person behind the glass. Celeste looks at Hans. He knows what she is thinking. If they leave now, they may survive. But the person inside that room could be the only remaining link to the truth about the project and Celeste's missing memories. Hans tells her there is another way out. Celeste asks how long it will take. He says they have minutes. That is all she needs to hear. She moves toward the control panel beside the chamber. The security system is already counting down, and several warning lights are flashing across the wall. Hans tries to override the lockdown, but the system refuses his first command. Celeste looks through the glass again. The mysterious subject is standing quietly on the other side. There is something strange about the way the person is watching her. There is no panic, no attempt to escape, almost as if they already know Celeste is going to open the door. Hans finally manages to access an emergency release. The door opens. The subject steps out slowly. Celeste immediately keeps her weapon ready. She does not know what the experiment has done to this person. She has already seen what the other subjects are capable of, and she has no intention of making the same mistake twice. But the person does not attack. Instead, they look directly at Celeste and say her name. Celeste freezes. She never introduced herself. Hans looks away. That reaction tells Celeste that he knows more than he has admitted. The subject explains that they have been waiting for her. Celeste demands to know why. The answer is not what she expected. The project was never only about creating enhanced soldiers. The scientists were studying how the human body could be pushed beyond its natural limits while keeping the mind intact. The early experiments were failures because the physical changes were too extreme. Some subjects became uncontrollable, others lost their memories, and some simply died. The project continued anyway. The people running it believed that eventually they would find the correct combination of physical enhancement and psychological stability. Celeste asks where she fits into all of this. The subject looks at Hans. Hans finally admits that Celeste was never supposed to become one of the enhanced soldiers. She was something else. She was a control case. The researchers wanted to study a naturally exceptional human being before making artificial improvements. Her military performance made her valuable because she already possessed many of the qualities they were trying to create artificially. Her reaction speed, her endurance, her ability to remain calm under pressure. Her accuracy. They wanted to know whether those traits could be reproduced. Celeste remembers the medical evaluations from years ago. For the first time, those memories begin connecting. The tests were not random. They were part of a much larger study. She asks Hans whether her memories were altered. He hesitates. That hesitation is enough. Celeste steps closer. She wants the truth. Hans admits that after one of the early operations went wrong, Celeste was exposed to information that the project could not allow her to remember. Rather than eliminating her, the people running the operation decided to manipulate the records surrounding her involvement and remove certain details from her official history. Celeste cannot believe what she is hearing. She asks whether they actually changed her memory. Hans explains that the process was experimental, unreliable, and never as simple as erasing a memory. They used medication, psychological conditioning, and carefully constructed information to make certain events difficult for her to access. Celeste suddenly remembers flashes, a room. Bright lights, a medical table, people talking behind glass, a voice telling her to remain calm, then nothing. She closes her eyes, the memories come back in pieces, and one image is clearer than the rest. A young soldier standing beside her, the same person she saw in the photograph. The subject standing in front of her is that soldier. They survived. Celeste asks what happened after the operation. The answer reveals another painful part of the story. The soldier was supposed to be transferred to another facility. Instead, the project classified them as a failed subject. They were never released. They were kept underground, while the researchers continued studying their condition. Years passed. The outside world moved on. The project changed. Scientists came and went, but the subject remained. Until the current escape caused the facility to begin collapsing from within. Celeste looks at Hans with anger. He knew this person was alive, and yet he never told her. Hans says he believed revealing the truth would put Celeste in even greater danger. Celeste tells him that he does not get to decide that anymore. Before Hans can respond, another impact shakes the corridor. The engineered soldier has reached the lower level. The subject immediately reacts. They know the soldier. More importantly, the soldier knows them. For a moment, neither moves. Then something unexpected happens. The soldier stops. He does not attack. Instead, he looks at the subject behind Celeste. Hans realizes what is happening. The subjects were not created as completely separate experiments. Their conditioning was linked. Certain signals and responses were shared between them. That means the person Celeste just rescued may be capable of influencing the others. But there is a problem. The influence is not reliable. The subject tries to communicate with the approaching soldier. It works for a few seconds. The soldier lowers his weapon. Then the conditioning takes over again. His expression changes. He charges. Celeste pushes the subject out of the way and fires. The shot does not stop him. The fight explodes through the corridor. This time, Celeste is not alone. The rescued subject joins her. They move differently from the other soldiers. They are weaker physically, but their knowledge of the facility gives them an advantage. They know the layout, the security systems, and the hidden routes. They lead Celeste and Hans toward an emergency passage. The engineered soldier follows. The corridor becomes a maze of doors and narrow walkways. Celeste realizes that the facility itself is becoming their enemy. Every few seconds another security door closes, forcing them to change direction. Hans finally reaches a control station. He tells Celeste there is one way to disable the containment system, but doing so will also unlock the cells holding the remaining subjects. Celeste asks how many there are. Hans looks at the monitors. His expression changes. There are more than he expected. The project did not have 3 escaped soldiers. There are dozens of containment chambers. Most are empty, but several are still occupied. Celeste looks at the screen. She realizes the situation is much bigger than she imagined. If the containment system shuts down completely, every remaining subject could escape. And if they are anything like the soldiers already hunting them, the facility could become the center of a catastrophe. Hans says they have two choices: leave the facility and allow the system to continue, or shut it down and risk releasing everything inside. Celeste thinks about her daughter waiting outside. Then she looks at the people trapped underground. She knows she cannot save everyone, but she also knows that leaving them behind would mean allowing the same people who destroyed her past to continue controlling their lives. For years, Celeste tried to forget what happened. Now she has a chance to end it. She reaches for the control panel. And this time, she is not thinking about revenge. She is thinking about making sure nobody else has to become another forgotten experiment. Celeste's hand remains over the control panel for a moment longer than Hans expects. She knows there is no perfect choice here. If she leaves the system active, the people trapped inside these chambers could remain prisoners, or worse. If she shuts it down, she could unleash something that nobody is prepared to control. But there is one thing she has learned tonight: doing nothing is still a decision, and sometimes it is the most dangerous one. Celeste finally activates the override. For a second, nothing happens. Then the facility changes. The warning lights disappear. The heavy electronic hum running through the walls suddenly stops, leaving the underground level almost completely silent. Hans looks at the monitors. One by one, the containment chambers unlock. Doors slide open. Some rooms are empty, others are not. Celeste watches the screens carefully, trying to understand what has just been released. She expects immediate chaos, but the subjects do not rush out. Many of them simply remain inside their chambers, confused by the sudden change. That gives Celeste a few precious seconds. She tells Hans to open the emergency evacuation route. He begins working on the controls. The rescued subject stays near Celeste, watching the monitors. They tell her that not every person inside these chambers is dangerous. Some were experiments that failed. Some are physically damaged. Some have been kept alive for years without understanding why. Celeste looks at the rows of cells and realizes how much suffering this project has created. She asks the subject how they survived. The answer is simple: they adapted. The researchers kept changing the treatments, trying to force the body to accept the enhancements. The process destroyed some subjects, but others learned how to live with the changes. The subject standing beside Celeste is one of those survivors. But there is another problem. The escaped soldiers are also changing. The conditioning that once kept them under control is breaking down, and when that happens, nobody can predict what they will do. A loud crash comes from somewhere above. Hans looks at the security monitors. One of the soldiers has reached the upper level. Another has entered the main laboratory, and a third is moving toward the exit. Celeste realizes they are no longer dealing with one enemy. The entire facility is becoming unstable. Hans tells her they need to leave before the security systems completely fail. Celeste agrees, but she refuses to abandon the people who can still be rescued. She asks Hans to open every accessible chamber. He hesitates. There are too many. They cannot physically guide everyone out. Celeste tells him to open them anyway. The decision creates chaos almost immediately. Doors unlock throughout the underground level. Some subjects run, others collapse. A few simply stand in the corridors, unable to understand what freedom means after years of confinement. Celeste helps one of them to their feet. The moment reminds her that these people are not monsters. They are victims. Whatever they have become, they did not choose this. And that changes the way she sees the soldiers hunting them. For the first time, she wonders whether those soldiers also understand what has been done to them. Maybe beneath all that strength and violence is someone who never had a choice. Before she can think about it further, the sound of fighting reaches them. The butcher has arrived. He moves through the corridor with terrifying confidence. Several guards attempt to stop him. They do not last long. Celeste watches from behind a doorway. She recognizes immediately that this is not a fight she can take head-on. The butcher is too powerful, but she also notices something else. He is not looking for her. He is searching for Hans. That gives her an opportunity. Celeste tells Hans to stay hidden while she draws the soldier away. Hans refuses. He says the soldier will kill her. Celeste tells him that if he stays, the soldier will kill both of them. There is no time for another argument. Celeste steps into the corridor. The butcher sees her. For a moment, Everything stops. Then he moves. Celeste runs. She leads him through a narrow passage, forcing him away from the control room. She knows she cannot outrun him forever, so she needs a location where his strength becomes less useful. She enters an old maintenance area. The ceiling is low. The corridors are narrow. There is barely enough space for one person to move comfortably. The butcher enters behind her. Celeste waits. He advances. She attacks. The fight is brutal. The butcher's strength is overwhelming, but the cramped environment prevents him from using it effectively. Celeste moves quickly, striking and retreating before he can grab her. He catches her once. She barely escapes. Another strike sends her into the wall. For a moment, she cannot breathe. The butcher approaches. Celeste looks around. Then she sees an exposed pipe above him. She knows what she has to do. She fires. The pipe bursts. Steam fills the corridor. The butcher steps back, temporarily blinded. Celeste escapes through a side passage. She is injured, exhausted, and running out of options, but she has bought herself time. Back in the control room, Hans has discovered something important. The facility's central database contains records from the earliest version of the project. Among those files is information about the program's original purpose. It was not created to build an army. The military wanted soldiers who could survive conditions that ordinary humans could not: extreme environments, severe injuries, long-term combat situations. The original concept was about survival, but the project changed when the scientists discovered that genetic manipulation could produce much greater results. The goal shifted from helping soldiers survive. It became about creating soldiers who could outperform humans completely. That ambition is what turned the project into a nightmare. Hans finds another file. This one concerns Celeste. It contains information from the same period when she was still serving in the military. But there is something he did not expect. Celeste's file contains a recommendation. The researchers wanted her to become part of a more advanced phase of the program. She was considered an ideal candidate. Hans realizes that someone deliberately removed her from consideration. Someone protected her. And that person was not Hans. He searches deeper. The name attached to the decision appears on the screen. It belongs to someone Celeste knows. Someone who has been around her life for years. Someone she trusted. Hans immediately understands what this means. The person who helped hide Celeste's connection to the project may also be the person who brought the soldiers to her. Because protecting someone and controlling someone can sometimes look exactly the same from the outside. Hans closes the file. But it is too late. Someone else has seen the information. A figure is standing behind him. Hans turns. It is not Celeste. It is one of the facility's senior operatives. The man points a weapon at him and demands the data. Hans refuses. The operative tells him that Celeste will never leave the facility alive. Hans asks why. The answer is chilling. Because Celeste was never the real target. She was bait. The entire operation was designed to bring her back to this facility. And now that she has returned, the final stage of the experiment can begin. Hans slowly realizes that everything that happened tonight may have been planned long before Celeste ever arrived at the facility. The attacks, the pursuit, the escaped soldiers, even the information she discovered could all have been pieces of one larger plan. Celeste was never simply being hunted. She was being brought back. The operative standing behind Hans keeps his weapon trained on him and demands the data. Hans refuses to hand it over. He knows that once the information leaves his control, there will be no way to expose what happened inside the facility. The operative tells him that exposure is exactly what they are trying to prevent. Hans asks what will happen to Celeste. The man gives him an answer that makes the situation even darker. She is going to be given a choice, but it will not be a real choice. Hans looks at the security monitors and realizes that Celeste has already entered the section they wanted her to reach. She is moving deeper into the facility, following the trail of information they deliberately left behind. Every discovery has pushed her closer. Every door she opened was another step toward the final stage. And now she is exactly where they wanted her. The operative leaves Hans locked inside the control room. Hans immediately begins looking for another way out. He knows the facility better than anyone, but the security system has been redesigned. Several of the controls he once had access to are now blocked. Someone changed the system after he lost control of the project. That means there are people above him who have been preparing for this moment. Hans searches through the old files again. Then he finds something unexpected, a project designation he has not seen in years. It is connected to Celeste. But this time, The file is not about her military record. It is about her daughter. Hans stares at the screen. The child's name appears in the database. He cannot understand why. Celeste's daughter was never supposed to have any connection to the project. At least, that is what Hans believed. He opens the file. Most of the information is encrypted, but one section is accessible. There are genetic records. Hans immediately realizes what they mean. The researchers have been monitoring Celeste's family. Not just Celeste, her daughter as well. He suddenly understands why Celeste was brought back to the facility. The project is not interested only in what happened to her. They are interested in what she passed on. Hans tries to access more information, but the system locks him out. A message appears on the screen. Project Onslaught final phase. Hans goes completely still. He remembers hearing that name years ago. At the time, Onslaught was not the name of a weapon or a group. It was the name given to the final stage of the enhancement program. The scientists believed they had finally solved the biggest problem with their earlier experiments. The body could be strengthened. The problem was the mind. Enhanced subjects became unstable because their neurological systems could not handle the physical changes. The final phase was designed to solve that problem. Instead of forcing an adult subject through the process, the researchers wanted to identify biological traits that could potentially produce a naturally stable enhanced human. That is why Celeste's genetic profile mattered. And that is why her daughter matters even more. Hans realizes the project has been watching them for years, before he can process it. The control room door opens. The operative returns. Hans asks him whether Celeste's daughter is part of the final phase. The man does not answer directly. Instead, he tells Hans that the project has already begun. Hans immediately understands. The operation outside was never just about capturing Celeste. It was about separating her from her daughter. If Celeste is inside the facility, her daughter is vulnerable. Hans attacks the operative before he can react. The struggle is brief but violent. Hans manages to escape the control room and grabs the access card from the man's equipment. He runs. He has only one objective now: find Celeste, warn her. And get her daughter out of there. Meanwhile, Celeste is still moving through the lower levels. She has no idea what Hans has discovered. She reaches a large observation chamber. The room is filled with monitors displaying medical information. There are photographs of different subjects. Some are marked as failures, others are marked as successful. Celeste sees the butcher, she sees Crybaby, she sees Cockroach, but then she sees herself, and beside her photograph is another image. Her daughter. Celeste's breathing changes. For the first time since entering the facility, she loses her composure. Someone has been watching her family. Someone has been collecting information about her daughter. She immediately turns around. She needs to get back, but the door behind her closes. A voice comes through the speakers, the same voice that has been guiding the operation. It tells Celeste that she has finally reached the place where she was meant to be. Celeste demands to know who they are. The voice refuses to give a name. Instead, it tells her that she has misunderstood the entire situation. The soldiers were never sent to kill her. They were sent to push her here. Celeste realizes that the attacks were controlled. The soldiers could have killed her several times. Instead, they forced her to move in specific directions. Every escape route led her closer to the facility. Every apparent victory was part of the plan. Celeste asks what they want. The voice answers with one word: her. But not in the way she expects. They do not want her dead. They want to know whether she is capable of surviving the final phase. Celeste understands immediately. She was never just bait. She is the test. The facility begins changing around her. Doors lock. Machines activate. Lights appear behind the observation glass. Celeste sees equipment she has never seen before. The voice tells her that the experiment has evolved. The old soldiers were prototypes. They were powerful, but unstable. Celeste is different. She already possesses the psychological traits the researchers were trying to create. She has discipline, control, adaptability, and above all, she has a reason to survive. Her daughter, the voice, tells her that if she completes the test, she will be allowed to leave. Celeste asks what happens if she refuses. The answer is immediate. Her daughter will never be safe. That is the moment Celeste stops listening. She looks at the cameras. She knows someone is watching. She tells them that they made one mistake. They assumed she would choose survival over everything else, but they do not understand why she has survived this long. She does not fight because she wants to live. She fights because someone she loves needs her too. The voice becomes silent. Then the doors open. Celeste steps into the chamber. She knows the test has begun. But she also knows something the people watching her do not. She has spent her entire life learning how to survive impossible situations, and if they want to turn her into their ultimate weapon, they may soon discover that weapons can choose who they fight for. Elsewhere, Hans finally reaches the upper level. He finds Celeste's daughter, but he is not alone. Someone is already waiting for them. And when Hans recognizes the person standing in front of him, he realizes the biggest secret of the entire project has nothing to do with the soldiers. It has been standing in Celeste's life all along. Hans slowly realizes that everything that happened tonight may have been planned long before Celeste ever arrived at the facility. The attacks, the pursuit, the escaped soldiers, even the information she discovered could all have been pieces of one larger plan. Celeste was never simply being hunted. She was being brought back. The operative standing behind Hans keeps his weapon trained on him and demands the data. Hans refuses to hand it over. He knows that once the information leaves his control, there will be no way to expose what happened inside the facility. The operative tells him that exposure is exactly what they are trying to prevent. Hans asks what will happen to Celeste. The man gives him an answer that makes the situation even darker. She is going to be given a choice, but it will not be a real choice. Hans looks at the security monitors and realizes that Celeste has already entered the section they wanted her to reach. She is moving deeper into the facility, following the trail of information they deliberately left behind. Every discovery has pushed her closer. Every door she opened was another step toward the final stage. And now she is exactly where they wanted her. The operative leaves Hans locked inside the control room. Hans immediately begins looking for another way out. He knows the facility better than anyone, but the security system has been redesigned. Several of the controls he once had access to are now blocked. Someone changed the system after he lost control of the project. That means there are people above him who have been preparing for this moment. Hans searches through the old files again. Then he finds something unexpected, a project designation he has not seen in years. It is connected to Celeste. But this time, the file is not about her military record. It is about her daughter. Hans stares at the screen. The child's name appears in the database. He cannot understand why. Celeste's daughter was never supposed to have any connection to the project. At least, that is what Hans believed. He opens the file. Most of the information is encrypted, but one section is accessible. There are genetic records. Hans immediately realizes what they mean. The researchers have been monitoring Celeste's family. Not just Celeste, her daughter as well. He suddenly understands why Celeste was brought back to the facility. The project is not interested only in what happened to her. They are interested in what she passed on. Hans tries to access more information, but the system locks him out. A message appears on the screen. Project Onslaught Final Phase. Hans goes completely still. He remembers hearing that name years ago. At the time, Onslaught was not the name of a weapon or a group. It was the name given to the final stage of the enhancement program. The scientists believed they had finally solved the biggest problem with their earlier experiments. The body could be strengthened. The problem was the mind. Enhanced subjects became unstable because their neurological systems could not handle the physical changes. The final phase was designed to solve that problem. Instead of forcing an adult subject through the process, the researchers wanted to identify biological traits that could potentially produce a naturally stable enhanced human. That is why Celeste's genetic profile mattered. And that is why her daughter matters even more. Hans realizes the project has been watching them for years, before he can process it. The control room door opens. The operative returns. Hans asks him whether Celeste's daughter is part of the final phase. The man does not answer directly. Instead, he tells Hans that the project has already begun. Hans immediately understands. The operation outside was never just about capturing Celeste. It was about separating her from her daughter. If Celeste is inside the facility, her daughter is vulnerable. Hans attacks the operative before he can react. The struggle is brief but violent. Hans manages to escape the control room and grabs the access card from the man's equipment. He runs. He has only one objective now: find Celeste, warn her. And get her daughter out of there. Meanwhile, Celeste is still moving through the lower levels. She has no idea what Hans has discovered. She reaches a large observation chamber. The room is filled with monitors displaying medical information. There are photographs of different subjects. Some are marked as failures. Others are marked as successful. Celeste sees the butcher. She sees Crybaby. she sees cockroach. But then she sees herself. And beside her photograph is another image. Her daughter. Celeste's breathing changes. For the first time since entering the facility, she loses her composure. Someone has been watching her family. Someone has been collecting information about her daughter. She immediately turns around. She needs to get back. But the door behind her closes. A voice comes through the speakers. The same voice that has been guiding the operation. It tells Celeste that she has finally reached the place where she was meant to be. Celeste demands to know who they are. The voice refuses to give a name. Instead, it tells her that she has misunderstood the entire situation. The soldiers were never sent to kill her. They were sent to push her here. Celeste realizes that the attacks were controlled. The soldiers could have killed her several times. Instead, they forced her to move in specific directions. Every escape route led her closer to the facility. Every apparent victory was part of the plan. Celeste asks what they want. The voice answers with one word. Her. But not in the way she expects. They do not want her dead. They want to know whether she is capable of surviving the final phase. Celeste understands immediately. She was never just bait. She is the test. The facility begins changing around her. Doors lock. Machines activate. Lights appear behind the observation glass. Celeste sees equipment she has never seen before. The voice tells her that the experiment has evolved. The old soldiers were prototypes. They were powerful, but unstable. Celeste is different. She already possesses the psychological traits the researchers were trying to create. She has discipline, control, adaptability, and above all, she has a reason to survive. Her daughter, the voice, tells her that if she completes the test, she will be allowed to leave. Celeste asks what happens if she refuses. The answer is immediate. Her daughter will never be safe. That is the moment Celeste stops listening. She looks at the cameras. She knows someone is watching. She tells them that they made one mistake. They assumed she would choose survival over everything else. But they do not understand why she has survived this long. She does not fight because she wants to live. She fights because someone she loves needs her too. The voice becomes silent. Then the doors open. Celeste steps into the chamber. She knows the test has begun. But she also knows something the people watching her do not. She has spent her entire life learning how to survive impossible situations. And if they want to turn her into their ultimate weapon, they may soon discover that weapons can choose who they fight for. Elsewhere, Hans finally reaches the upper level. He finds Celeste's daughter. But he is not alone. Someone is already waiting for them. And when Hans recognizes the person standing in front of him, he realizes the biggest secret of the entire project has nothing to do with the soldiers. It has been standing in Celeste's life all along. The moment the facility begins shaking, Celeste realizes that the people behind the experiment have lost something they were never supposed to lose. Control. The three soldiers inside the chamber look toward the walls as alarms continue flashing. For the first time, none of them seems completely focused on Celeste. The noise, the emergency lights, and the sudden changes happening throughout the facility are disrupting the conditioning that has kept them under control. Celeste notices it immediately. The butcher takes a step forward, but Cockroach turns toward him. Crybaby watches both of them. For a brief moment, they look less like a coordinated unit and more like three dangerous individuals who no longer know what they are supposed to do. Celeste understands that this is her opening. She does not attack. Instead, she moves sideways, keeping all three of them in her line of sight. The voice from the control room orders the soldiers to eliminate her. Nothing happens. The command is repeated. Still nothing. The conditioning is failing. Someone behind the glass starts shouting orders, but the soldiers are no longer responding the way they were programmed to. Then the butcher suddenly moves. Celeste prepares for the attack, but he does not come for her. He turns toward the observation window. The glass explodes as he slams into it. The researchers behind the window scatter. Celeste realizes what is happening. The soldiers have finally recognized who their real enemy is. The people who created them. The people who kept them locked away. The people who treated them like weapons instead of human beings. Chaos spreads through the facility. Celeste uses the confusion to escape the chamber. She runs into the corridor and immediately starts searching for her daughter. That is the only thing that matters now. The experiment can collapse. The facility can burn. The soldiers can escape. But she has to find her child. She moves through the corridors while security teams rush in the opposite direction. Nobody is paying attention to her anymore. Everyone is trying to survive the breakdown of the facility. That gives Celeste a chance to move quickly. She reaches a control station and accesses the internal communication system. Hans's voice comes through. He tells her that he has her daughter. Celeste stops. For the first time in hours, she hears something that gives her hope. She asks where they are. Hans gives her a location. He says they are heading toward an emergency exit beneath the old laboratory. Celeste starts moving, but Hans warns her that someone is following them. The same person who has been protecting the project for years. The person connected to Celeste's past. Celeste understands. This is the confrontation she has been avoiding, not with the soldiers, not with the scientists, with the person who helped erase her past. She reaches the lower corridor. The lights are failing now. Smoke begins filling the area. Several containment doors stand open. Some of the surviving subjects are moving through the facility, frightened and confused. Celeste passes them without stopping. She cannot save everyone herself, but she hopes that opening the doors has given them a chance to escape. Then she sees Hans. He is carrying Celeste's daughter through the corridor. Celeste runs toward them. Her daughter immediately reaches for her. Celeste grabs her and holds her tightly. For a moment, the entire nightmare disappears. There is no experiment, no soldiers, no military operation. Just a mother holding her child. Then Hans tells her they have to keep moving. Celeste looks behind him. The corridor is empty. To empty. She asks where the person who was following them went. Hans does not answer. A voice comes from the darkness. The answer is standing right there. The person steps into the emergency lighting. Celeste recognizes them instantly. This is someone she trusted before. Someone who was part of her life when she was still serving in the military, someone who knew about the experiments, and someone who deliberately kept the truth from her. Celeste asks why. Why bring her here? Why watch her family? Why use her daughter? The person tells her that none of this was personal. That answer makes Celeste even angrier, because to them, her life was never a life. It was data. Her military career was data. Her body was data. Her memories were data. And now her daughter is data too. Celeste refuses to listen anymore. She tells Hans to take her daughter and leave. The person raises a weapon. Celeste steps between them. The confrontation begins. Unlike the fights with the engineered soldiers, this one is personal. Celeste knows the person in front of her. She knows how they think. She knows their training. She knows their habits. And they know hers. For a few moments, neither has an advantage. They move through the corridor, using the same military techniques they once learned together. Celeste blocks an attack. The other person counters. She moves again. A strike catches her shoulder. She stumbles but stays standing. Her opponent tells her that she could have had everything. They could have made her stronger. Faster. Almost impossible to kill. Celeste looks at them and says she never wanted to become a weapon. The person responds that she already was one. That sentence hits her harder than the attack, because part of Celeste knows it is true. Her entire military life was built around being useful in situations where other people could not survive. But there is one thing the project never understood. Celeste chose what kind of person she wanted to become after leaving that world. She chose motherhood. She chose a normal life. And she chose not to let someone else define her. The fight becomes more violent. Hans gets Celeste's daughter farther away. Celeste finally gains the advantage. She disarms her opponent and forces them to the ground. She could kill them. For a moment, it seems like she might. Then she stops. She refuses to become the thing they wanted her to be. Instead, she leaves them behind. The facility shakes again. A massive explosion occurs somewhere above them. The emergency exit begins opening. Hans tells Celeste they have seconds. They run. Behind them, the facility is collapsing. Years of secret experiments are disappearing beneath concrete and fire. The soldiers are gone. The researchers are fleeing. The project is finally breaking apart. But Celeste knows that destroying the facility does not erase what happened. Too many people were hurt. Too many lives were changed. And somewhere out there, there may still be people connected to the program. As they reach the surface, Celeste turns back one final time. She watches the facility disappear into the darkness. Her daughter stands beside her. Hans looks at Celeste. He knows she still has questions. So does she. But for the first time, she is no longer afraid of the answers. Because whatever happened to her in the past, it does not control who she is now. She survived the experiment. She survived the soldiers. She survived the people who wanted to turn her into a weapon. And most importantly, she protected her daughter. But as they walk away from the ruins, Hans notices something on the horizon. A distant light. Then another. Vehicles. More than one. Celeste sees them too. Her expression changes. The facility may be destroyed, but the people behind it may not be finished. And if those vehicles are carrying more soldiers, then tonight was never the end of the experiment. It was only the beginning.